Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to 1% Better, where we take a look at hidden stories in sports. I'm your host, Jan Frodeno, and I'm joined as always by Dr. David Lipman. I do have a medical question for you this week. I didn't have one last week, but here goes. What's the only external layer of the skin with no subcutaneous fat? That's under the skin, right? That's no.
So subcutaneous fat is under the skin. That's what it means. Subcutaneous being under skin.
Yeah.
I'm going to say epidermis, I guess, because it's attached to the dermis, and I assume the subcutaneous fat sits between the dermis and I don't know what that is, subdermis.
It's the eyelids, thinnest skin on the body.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about area of skin. Okay, I misinterpreted that question. That makes sense, and that threw me because I was like, I swear the subcutaneous fat sits under the epidermis. So yeah, that makes sense. There's no fat on eyelids. Yeah, you could ask better questions there, mate.
Attacking the messenger again. I really like that strategy. You're like, I misinterpreted that question. Sorry, I would have known the answer if I interpreted.
Oh, I mean, if you'd said what area doesn't have any fat, I would have gone. I may have guessed that, but like, I would have. Yeah. Anyway, all good, man. All good.
By the way, listeners might hear someone snoring behind me. Generally, we get that on the pod from time to time. And that is Mo, David's French bulldog. But once again, during this recording, David and I are in the same location. I'm looking out at the stunning mountain view that he's got from his chateau. Not chalet. Chateau in France. And Mo is lying at my feet snoring. So same dog, same noise, different podcast host this time around.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you get to have it, not me, mate. It gets tedious, although I do love him. I just had a question, mate. Something happened this morning. You wouldn't let me take a video of it. I need listeners to hear about this.
I like how you're learning from me. You're getting podcast content from everyday life observations.
You didn't need to teach me about this. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I want listeners to let me know about this. Let us know about this. So he did the right thing. Xylon did the right thing, which is to say you put the granola or the cereal in the bowl first. And I think that's really important because I have lots of arguments with people like this. That goes in first. We agree. You then put the Greek yogurt on top, which I agree with. What happened next, though, I'll never be okay with, mate. You put that in the microwave to microwave it. You microwaved granola and Greek yogurt, mate. What's going on?
Don't leave it there. Give people full context because people are now coming to realize what a weirdo I am. But I didn't warm it up. I didn't microwave it, for want of a better term. I put it in the microwave for a very specific 7 to 8 seconds to bring the cold yogurt to a little more of a room temperature and take that chill off it. Not warm it up. Take the chill off it to help my sensitive teeth. My teeth are like my personality. Very sensitive.
Anyway, so let us know if you're on the correct side of history, which is cereal first, or milk/yogurt first, which is the wrong side of history. And then let us know if Xylon's a weirdo for microwaving his cereal.
I didn't even know that was the thing you're talking about, the order that the food goes. I would have been 2 weeks before. If this was 2 weeks ago, I would have been like, what are you talking about? Obviously, everyone does cereal first, muesli first, and then yogurt. But I was at a training camp with the pro team I work with. And one of the riders was putting yogurt in his bowl and then putting the fruit salad on top of the yogurt. And we were all looking at him like, what's going on here? What are you doing? But anyway, I'm not one to judge because 99% of listeners right now are going, what in the hell are you doing putting your yogurt in the microwave? So who am I to judge? We do have to give a shout out to Precision Fuel and Hydration for partnering us with this podcast. I've got a confession to make. So I'm busy traveling. I've been on the road in Europe.
Another confession aside from microwaving cereal? Or
well, that wasn't a confession. That was me getting thrown under the bus by you. But I've been traveling. I've been on the road for 3 weeks. So I ran out of my Precision Fuel and Hydration electrolytes. So I used some other brand. And I took out these tabs. I tried to break them in half to put them into the small bottle of water that I had. And it just crumbled all over my hands. And it was dusty and my hands were messy and this tablet just disintegrated. Precision, have you noticed? It's the small details that I love about this company. Their tablets have this little slit in that allows you to break the tablet perfectly in half if you don't want to use the entire tablet.
It's called scoring. I did notice that. Their attention to detail is immaculate, though. The little leashes on the 30-gram gels, the fact they make a 90-gram gel that's resealable. They have a bite valve for that 90-gram gel that people may not know about as well, where you attach it and then you can just suck it straight out of it. Just there. When we think about products in the industry, we tend to think about stuff like I tend to talk about big P product and little P product. So the little P product in this case is like the gel or the electrolytes themselves. Do they taste good? Do they work, etc. The big P product is how is it packaged and what's the size and all those things. And they nail the big P product, I reckon. So yeah, kudos to Precision. And if you're looking for some, we do have a discount code. It is OPB2025. It's good for 15% off your first order. We have some links in the show notes, one to the website, one to their fuel and hydration planner, which we'd encourage you to use. All of those, if you follow the links in our show notes, they will apply the code automatically for you. So thanks again to Precision for sponsoring us. And please go try their products if you haven't.
We got a bunch of listener questions, not questions, community shout outs to get through because we sort of recorded a bunch of episodes ahead of time. And this is the first time we're recording a live one for a couple of weeks. So we got a backlog of stuff to get through. I wanted to ask you how you were, but I also wanted to shout out a listener who I cannot for the life of me remember who it was now, telling me I'm sounding a lot more positive on the podcast, and they are here for it and they're loving it.
Matt Hawkins. It's in
you're right.
It's in our community shout outs later, mate. But you are a lot more positive, mate. You got out this morning or yesterday or whenever it was for a bit of a hike on our trail at the front of our house. And you went 5Ks, which was really good, mate. So and you said no issues with your back. We also did a bunch of walking at Tour de France. And you started limping towards the end of that, but it was a 20,000 step day. So you've been super positive about that, which is awesome. So fill the listeners in.
Yeah, that day we were at the Tour de France was obviously we were thanks to you in the VIP car, one of the Alpecin de Koenig team, and that was a lot of sitting and driving up and down, in and out, and then also on top of that 20,000 steps. So no surprise that the body took a beating that day, but still wasn't as bad as I expected. And the other day, I must tell you, I even dreamt that I was running. And I was so bummed that I woke up and it was a dream. But it just shows maybe my body, that's where my body's heading and it's getting ready for that. When I get home, I'm certainly going to get back on the rehab program with the biokinetist. And I think we'll see how that goes. And then after a couple of weeks, start extending the cycling a bit and see how we go. I'm gaining more confidence in my body now. This 3-week trip on the road has given me a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I think that's for lots of reasons, right? Lots of travel, lots of uncomfortable physical situations, lots of stress associated with various things because that's what travel is, and poor recovery, right? You've been recovering up with us because it's a bit more chilled, but big cities and that sort of stuff and training camps. So, Matt, I think it's exciting. I'm excited for you. So stoked to see it.
Can I just be serious for a second and thank you for being a very gracious host here? So listeners need to know, when I wake up in the morning, David has made unbelievable coffee waiting for me there. It doesn't matter if I wake up an hour after him. The coffee is warm. It's there. It's waiting. I left their place after a couple of days to head to the Tour de France farm to go see some amazing people I get to work with there. I had to book my own accommodation. I didn't know how to look after myself. I was like, where's the coffee in the morning? Where are the vegetables at meals? I was just eating cheese and ham and bread like a student. I'm back with you now. And this morning, first morning back, fresh coffee was out again. What an amazing host you are, man.
We've got to look after you, mate. You're a good human, so we do need to look after you. All of our jokes at each other's expense in jest, we do get on really well. And so it's been great having you, and it's been a pleasure to look after you.
How was your run this morning? You went up, I saw you leaving here going up a mountain.
Yeah, it was good this morning. We went a bit more exploring. It's. I think I needed to update listeners for those who don't follow us on social. I got that King of the Mountain that we talked about a little while ago. So there's a couple that I nailed in one go. It's kind of up to a lower point, and then there's up to a slightly higher point, and then there's down from both, and then there's down from the lower point, and then there's an up down from the lower point. So I got all of those. I'm happy to have gotten all of those. I set up another one on a real steep climb here that I'm going to go sort of improve. I've already got that one, but I'm going to improve that one. And I want to try before we leave, now that I'm in better shape, or better shape for the mountains, try and lower that one to the low point that I was talking about, the one I was chasing from a way ago. I want to get that one below 25 minutes. So I'm like 25 and change. So we want to try and get that. So we'll update listeners.
That Strava King of the Mountains, I must say, that you got is that segment you got is more impressive now that I've seen it. I walked up along the road, and I mean, you leave your front door here, and it just kicks up immediately the mountainside. There's no time to warm up or anything. So I must say, kudos to you. Very, very impressive. I did notice you were wearing Stride power meters when you went off on your run this morning.
All the time, man. Always Stride, always wearing them. Unfortunately, my critical power has been dropping. I mean, keep getting these notifications like your critical power has been readjusted and it's going down.
What does that mean? We've talked about it before, but what does that mean?
Yeah, so critical power is roughly the power you can hold for an hour. It's like FTP in cycling. So it means that I'm detraining, really, is what it means. My capacity is reducing, which makes sense. I was training for, most recently when I was sort of holding that critical power, I was training for a half marathon, doing lots of efforts that were, in that duration. My half marathon PB is, is like 1:16. So it's not quite an hour, but it's there or thereabouts, or maybe 1:15. Maybe I'm just under 1:16, somewhere there. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Like within 1:15 high, 1:16 low, somewhere there. And so, that's roughly right around that critical power stuff. So I was doing a lot in that area, and I just haven't been doing any of that since, I stopped, since I was demotivated. So my whole power duration curve is reduced, right? That a power I can hold for a certain duration of time has gone down for all those times. But certainly my power duration curve is a lot less flat now. It's a lot steeper, which means like, I'm sort of maintaining some of that low duration stuff, but the real training effect of that durability is not there. And so, the critical power has gone down, but that's kind of motivating as well. And I'm sure it will be really motivating if and when I do start to like really hammer it again, because now you start to see these carrots of like, I'm improving these times, I'm improving these powers, right? So it kind of goes both ways. It is a bit motivating for me. It's like, I wish I could still do that, but not quite there yet on wanting to train seriously again.
Well, if you are curious about running with power, we highly recommend Stride Power Meters. We've got a link in the show notes down below. Check them out and find out why running with power is way more accurate than other metrics you might take into consideration. Should we get to some community shoutouts?
Yeah, we've got a few. So we'll start off. Laurie Rennack reached out to me. He was talking about the changing of allegiance stuff that we talked about a few weeks ago. And I mean, it's particularly pertinent to Laurie. He enjoyed it. Particularly pertinent to him because he's French, but played rugby league for the Netherlands. So, he was sort of saying a lot of what we talked about resonated with him. And I also wanted to shout out Will Gadd. So he reached out to me after our episode where I talked about specificity of training at one point. And I mentioned Super Training by Mel Siff as a book, and he reached out for the book or for some books on S&C to learn. And I would not recommend Super Training to anybody who doesn't already have a background in this. It is a hyper complicated book, very technical, but I did recommend Science and Practice of Strength Training by Will Kramer and Vladimir Zetsiorsky. I sent that to him and he's like, this book was published before I was born. And I was like, I want to vomit in my mouth because it was published in, I think, in 1995. And I was like, that's not that long ago. And I was like, well, that's actually 30 years ago. So yeah, that is a long time ago. So yes, I did not feel good about myself there, but thanks, Will. It's good to hear.
You don't look a day over 50, man. Don't let them offend you. Also, shout out to John Bridget Sharp, who's still watching and commenting on our YouTube and pushing our YouTube channel. We are on YouTube, by the way, if you'd like to see our ugly mugs. 1% better, hidden stories in sport. You can find us there under that. Shout out to Victor Smangs on 7th in 21, ran 21:30 in the Swedish 10,000 meter champs.
29:30, mate. If he ran 21:30, he'd be breaking world records for the 10K or the 10,000 meters. So he ran he's on Runners FM podcast, who hosted me recently. Victor did. So I'm not sure if that's out yet, but shout out to Victor for running that time. That was amazing.
And then also shout out, I don't know if these names are real. I think listeners are winding up. They're adding names to their names to see how we pronounce them. But thank you for getting in touch. Dina, Anjara, Harry Lanto, Randrianiampianzo. I probably butchered your name, Dina. I apologize. But well done for, Yeah, it says had fun race today, and I'm glad to say it was run correctly. No disqualification this time, even with the new route. And that was in the, I'm also going to try and say this name and totally butcher it. Lotte Tzavek. which was like a 6K run, just over 6K, is running at 3:29 pace. So blistering fast, man.
Yeah. Obviously Nordic there. It's up in Sweden. So also wanted to shout out Andreas Vegan. So Andreas, we talk about a bit. So he got first place in the Bisu Kilometre. Looks like it was a half marathon. He ran 75 minutes, so it was pretty good. And Dusan Zabrodsky ran the Krokonoska 50K. Jeez, names aren't helping us today. I mean, it doesn't help that we're Anglophiles here, but yeah, not helping us. And then Dennis Clear, this interested me. I was trying to work out what was happening here. It took me some Googling. So Dennis Clear came 8th in the top-notch triathlon. So it was quite a short triathlon. I think it was like a 600-meter swim and like an 11K ride. But then this run, it was like 3.1 Ks. It's probably like a 2-mile run or something like that, which is 3.2 Ks. But it was 631 vertical meters, which is just over 2,000 feet and just under 2 miles, so like proper uphill. And he said he used some poles there. So I was like, what's going on here? So that's some serious uphill. That is legitimate. That's like 20% gradient, I think. So yeah, that's serious uphill. That's nasty.
It makes sense because I was like, why are you shouting him out for these short distances? But that gives it context. That elevation is serious. And Boris Cortez. Now I don't know what this meant. You mentioned it to me earlier this morning. He had a black finish at the Norseman. But what is a black finish?
So Norseman triathlon's like one of the bucket list triathlons for a lot of people. It's in Norway. You jump off the back of a barge to start the swim, and then you swim in and you ride your bike, and then you do the marathon. It's an Ironman distance or whatever, long distance, whatever you want to call that. But the second half of the half marathon differs based on a few things, but one of which is time. And if you get to a certain point quickly enough, they let you do the second half of the second half of the marathon uphill on trail. And this gets you a black finisher shirt. So I have a friend who did this, Meredith Hill. She did it many, many years ago and like alerted me to it. And then I didn't understand the black shirt finish thing. And I was looking it up and I was like, oh, that's what it is. So yeah, shout out to Boris. That's awesome. That was certainly a bucket list item for him. So I'm really, really happy to hear it.
And then Matt Hawkins, as we mentioned earlier, got in touch with us. He said, love the latest episode with Gary Fay. It's one of my all-time favorites. So many gems of wisdom in there. To be the noun, you need to do the verb. It's lucky David isn't 18 or he'd get that tattooed on his biceps. Oh, so good, Matt. He goes on to say, on the topic of sayings / buzzwords, I have a listener question. Can you explain the difference between a lesson and a learning? I've noticed you both using these terms more and more frequently. As a staunch anti-buzzword operator, I want to be friends with Matt. Matt, I want to be friends with
You don't. I'm friends with Matt. You don't want to be friends with him, I promise.
As a staunch anti-buzzword operator, I'm keen to hear your explanation. Also stoked to hear Xylon is feeling better. You're sounding more positive about things and happier as well. Long may it continue.
So I think it's pretty simple here. A lesson is something that's taught and a learning is something that's taken from a lesson. So you can take learnings from anything and people can give you lessons on things. You may not take any learnings from them. That's my take on this. So I'm hoping that cleared it up for you, Matt. I don't know if Xylon has a more astute take than that. I'm going to guess he doesn't. Yeah.
I wasn't even listening to his question. I was just so like into the jokes. He was making me laugh. I mean, we could spend 10 minutes talking about his bicep tattoo joke. Like we could spend a lot. That's what I'm more interested in.
I mean, it's ironic that he's giving me a grief about tattoos, given he got a pretty questionable tattoo I believe it was in Fiji, and ended up with a staph infection from it. So yeah,
no ways.
It's various ways.
Which part of the body?
On his calf, on his tiny little calves. Was
it an Iron Man tattoo? No,
it was I think it was a koi fish or something similar.
Hilarious. Last bit of shout out is from Frank O'Carroll.
Yep. So yeah, Frank, he left a comment on Spotify saying he loved the Gary episode and he was going to re-listen to it regularly. So it's awesome. If you haven't listened to the Gary Fay episode, it's our last one, episode 74, about mental health versus mental resilience. I think there's a lot in there for people, yes, athletes, but also people just working in high performance or trying to perform in general in work. So there's lots in it. We love that episode with Gary. We recorded it a while back, but yeah, it was evergreen and that's why we kept it. And it's, I really enjoyed it. I listened back to it during the show notes and I was like, geez, there was some real wisdom in here. So it's a great one.
Yeah, same for me. When I was editing, I had the same perspective again. Let's move on. Let's have a look at what's come across my desk this week. Wow, Hayden Wilde, the professional triathlete, is doing T100 London. Now, he had a very, very bad crash on the bike a couple of months ago, and we highlighted the injuries that he had been through, and you sort of speculated on what recovery could look like. But how are we seeing him back racing so quickly after all of those injuries?
Yes. Firstly, I like to keep through lines through this stuff, right? So, like, we've talked about Hayden Wild before, so I liked for people to sort of have follow up to that. It also gives listeners a bit of an Easter egg and those sort of things. But anyway, not to digress too much. There's a couple of things. Firstly, and they talk about this a bit in the Tour de France. It's like these athletes have superior healing capacities. Partially because they have a bunch of energy they usually spend on training and they're not training as much, so you can devote that energy to recovery. They're also healthier in general. Now, elite sport isn't healthy necessarily, but compared to your average person, elite athletes are probably a little bit more healthy in that respect, and they're often young, which helps as well. So there's certainly some energy redistribution there. One thing I would say to people is certainly don't skimp on eating, particularly protein, when you are injured. Those two things, protein and energy intake, are really important when you're injured. I wouldn't worry about gaining weight. Yeah, it's really important. You're devoting resources to healing. You're creating new skin, bone, etc. So you certainly need it. And of course, often replacing a lot of energy that went into the initial break. If you lost blood or whatever, then you got to replace that as well. So certainly don't skimp on that. And the T100 London's looking really interesting. There's a few people who've got wild cards and a bit happening around there. So it'll be interesting to watch T100 London. Yeah.
By the way, I love your strategy of having, through stories, because we latch on to personalities, we latch on to characters, and we follow their stories because we want to see the outcome. We want to see their success and failure at the end of it. That's story structure. So I love that you have incorporated Hayden into that. If you're a listener and you're listening for the first time, this is the kind of level of thinking that I just love about this podcast. So if you're listening for the first time, please consider subscribing and helping us grow, because we'd love for more people to come here and listen to comedians like Matt Hawkins, for instance.
His head is going to explode after that. Anyway.
Let's move on to UTMB. We're less than a month away from there. And if you've been onto our Instagram account is 1% Better Pod. You might have seen a reel of David showing me around Chamonix. So this is probably going to be the most vested I'm going to be in UTMB ever, because it'll be the first one taking place after I've been to Chamonix and seen the place for myself. But what can we look forward to in this year's event?
Well, we were talking to somebody at the Tour de France about this exact thing. So Jan Frodeno is, obviously often considered one of the GOATs of triathlon, if not the GOAT, at least for the men. And he announced he's running the OCC, which is one of the shorter races at the UTMB festival. It's a little bit complicated. UTMB, kind of like Ironman. So UTMB is now a series of races across the world. There's the UTMB World Series. Then there's the World Championships, which is what was previously called UTMB. And then within that, there is the actual race UTMB, the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc, which is 171 kilometers around the mountain. And there are the shorter ones. There's the TDS, which goes the other way, is more technical, more self-supported. The CCC, which starts in Courmayeur and is 100 kilometers, goes the same route otherwise as the UTMB. And then there's the OCC, which starts in Ossier and then jumps onto that same route and finishes it off. And it's like 64 kilometers, I think, although it's slightly different. So Jan's announced his race in the OCC. And we were talking about this to somebody. I think part of this is to do with his agreement with Hoka, because he's still sponsored by Hoka and they are the title sponsor of UTMB. And I think this will bring a lot of eyeballs.
That makes sense then. He hasn't paid for it. He hasn't paid for an entry then, cheapskate.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And he hasn't. And to get an OCC entry, you need to have done some other races, and he hasn't done those either. So he's been given a spot, and that's fine.
He's earned it. I think Jan Frodeno's earned it.
Well, I mean, if I was somebody who missed out on the OCC, I may disagree with that, but it's good for the race that he's going there or whatever. So he gets to do it. Now, there's a couple of things here. Firstly, he's somewhat lucky in that the OCC is early in the week, which means the trails are in better condition at that point. They haven't had thousands of people run over them and really mess them up and churn them up, particularly if it's been raining. But my take here is this will go one of two ways. So Jan is still very fit. There's no question about this. And in a flat 50-kilometer road race, I think I would pick him to win this potentially. It is not that, though. It is absolutely not that. So I think there's only one of two ways it goes. If it's a very dry day and Jan's been doing a bunch of trail running, which he could do, he lives in Andorra, lives near enough Girona, he could easily do a ton of trail running around there and get very good at trail running. And he's a pretty meticulous guy, so it wouldn't surprise me if he has done so. So he could certainly, on a dry day, do really well there. I think on a really wet, really chaotic mountain day where you've got bad weather and stuff, I think he may struggle because it's just not as much as what he's used to. And he's racing against Petter Engdahl, who you and I have talked to previously. He's previously won the CCC in this festival. He's a mountain athlete, trains with Kylian Jornet. So it would not surprise me. He hasn't been doing very well this year. He's been really struggling with his racing. So, that could go both ways. But I'm interested to see here because, again, as I said, weather's going to be a factor. But there's also a portion of UTMB, and it's actually in the Marathon du Mont Blanc course that is never on camera because it is so hard to get to, or it's not hard to get to, but hard to film on. Super technical downhill. And I think in a pair of Hokas, that's not going to be particularly pleasant to do for anybody, but certainly not for Jan. I certainly, during my Marathon du Mont Blanc aspect, really struggled on this part of the course just because I don't do as much technical downhill. So let's wait and see, but I'll be keeping an eye on both of them.
In case you haven't noticed, this podcast is not supported by Hoka. It's not sponsored.
Hey, I have no issues with Hoka shoes. It's just like the higher the stack height of the shoe, any shoe here, this could be the Adidas, Agravic, Speed, all that. High stack shoes are not going to be super good on technical downhill. That's the challenge of them, right? And Petter's racing in the Adidas there. And actually, Petter has a famous photo of his ankle getting absolutely torched when he won the CCC in a pair of those Adidas Agravic Speeds. So, it's worth considering here that just like you're trading off stack height for ankle stability at all times there because the momentum's change.
What else can we look forward to at the race?
Well, I mean, there's not been a lot of announcements for exactly who's racing. I have seen both Courtney Dauwalter and Jim Walmsley being announced for the UTMB itself, the big dance, which is huge because they're the course record holders. Jim's been battling a tendinopathy in his knee, which I didn't think meant he would come back, but he paced Ludovic Pomeray to Hard Rock in Hard Rock, so I think he's doing okay there. But let's see. I mean, the question is he going to be in the best shape possible? And I think the answer is almost categorically no. The second question is, does he need to be to win? And the answer to that is also no. Not because he's that much better, although he's very good and the best we've seen, but because so much of what creates a victory at UTMB isn't to do with your physiological capacity. So many things have to go your way, right? We saw last year where everyone dropped out. His name eludes me at the moment. I've got a picture of his face. Vincent Brouillard won it almost out of nowhere. But I also know Tom Evans is running, and he's been prepping in the valley with some serious help by some people.
It was so funny. We were walking in Chamonix, and this guy goes. We just hear this voice go, "David Lipman." And he's trying to get David's attention. This guy comes over. I can see he's a trail runner. He's wearing a Red Bull cap. And I'm like, it's probably Tom Evans. I don't know what he looks like. And then we leave and I ask David, who is that? And David's like, oh, it's only Tom Evans, like trying to get my attention.
I wasn't trying to get your attention. I was just like...
Yeah, no. Tom Evans is trying to get your attention.
Oh, yeah.
You hadn't seen him.
Yeah, I hadn't seen Tom. I'll catch up with him in the valley. Really nice guy. Obviously, I helped produce and sort of edit his podcast. So, we sort of know each other pretty well. I went for a bit of a run with him last year. So I'll definitely try and catch up with him again. But he's living up there in Argentière, I think, with his family and doing some prep with some serious sports scientists on that course. So watch out for Tom this year. It'll be interesting to watch how he goes. But, he's obviously trying his hardest. I think he's won the CCC before, and I think he's podiumed at UTMB. So I think he's trying to win. I know he's trying to win it. So let's see what happens here.
Let's move on to rugby news. We've talked before about Louis Rees-Zammit, who is British, right? And
Welsh.
then he's Welsh, yeah. And then he moved to try his hand at American football, to the NFL, and now he's returning to rugby.
Yeah. So I'm not very surprised by this for a couple of reasons. He always said he wanted to do this at the time he did it so that he could come back to rugby if he needed to or wanted to. So that's the first thing. So he was already had in mind, I may not make it or I may not be able to, so I'm going to maybe come back. So shouldn't surprise people by that. The second thing is he had a contract. He's sort of unsure if he's going to play receiver or running back, had this sort of extended playing squad contract with the Chiefs. Then he went to the Jaguars. Then he got sort of cut. And it's pretty cutthroat and ruthless. So that's part of it. But the biggest challenge for rugby players transitioning is if you don't play on Sunday, you don't get game time in anything. It's not like if you come to play rugby here and you don't play for the top team, you play for the second team. Like you don't get that. You don't get those reps. So, it's really hard for these guys to really learn the game because they don't play it. So you kind of need to transition a lot earlier. Maybe in college or play a second tier, go play some other leagues, right? So the CFL or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see. I think ultimately longer term, they're going to try and have second tier competitions for this sort of reason. But given there's a draft and all those things, it becomes a bit messy. But let's see what happens.
And then I'm hearing that the beer mile record has been broken.
Yeah, so the world record in the beer mile has gone down. So the guy ran 4:27, which is lightning for a mile for an average person. Even quicker when you have to chug 4 beers as well.
Can we just give context to what the beer mile is?
Yeah, so you chug a beer and then run a lap of the track, and you do that 4 times basically, or a little bit more because it's the mile's just over 4 laps of the track.
This was invented in Australia, surely.
I actually don't know that. I don't know where it was invented.
This says Australia written all over it, mate.
Well, I don't think an Australian's ever held the record. A lot of Canadians have held this record, so maybe it was invented in Canada. So I previously actually had dinner with one of the world record holders in this. He was the current world record holder at the time, and I was talking to him about his training. He was a very good miler, obviously, because you have to be, but you have to be able to drink really quickly as well. They do a ton of training with things like non-alcoholic beers, so they get used to the feeling of chugging and the sort of gas, but then you don't have to get physically have the effects of the alcohol. So he used to do this between classes he'd do training sessions and have to go back to class in college, so he had to have non-alcoholic beer. But the real skill here is the drinking speed, and then running with gas and beer in your belly. So. It's really impressive. You need to be probably a sub 4 minute miler. Well, almost definitely a sub 4 minute miler, and then be able to do this because you have to run. Yeah, probably have to be able to run sub 4, and then the beers take somewhere between 8 and 10 seconds total. So and then you're obviously going to be slower than your actual mile because you have to stop and drink the beer and then restart, and then also you have the beer in your belly. So it's crazy.
Yeah, a bunch of Canadians. It does sound like it's from Toronto, maybe. So I think you're right. It comes from Canada.
There you go.
Well done. Sometimes 1 + 1 = 2. Right, let's move on to Grand Slam. We've been following a bit the Grand Slam news. If you don't know, Grand Slam was started by a bunch of investors alongside Michael Johnson, wanting to create a more dynamic, entertaining athletic competition to sort of complement Diamond League, etc. But they've held a few events, and since they've cancelled the Los Angeles event that was meant to take place, and now athletes are coming out and saying they have not been paid yet.
Yeah, so I guess this is, again, another update from stuff we talked about previously. They were meant to be paid for at least the Kingston meet, which is their first one, by the 31st of July, and that had not happened at the time of recording. I think what's happened here is investors have pulled out. They don't have the money to pay these guys and girls, and it's now it's a real struggle. So let's see what happens. I'm hopeful for these athletes that they get paid. I'm also hopeful for Grand Slam that it happens again. And that they can get some money. But as I said to you the other day, imagine being an investor here and Michael Johnson's coming, going hey, we need some investment. He's like, cool, what are you going to do with it? Pay the debt we've accrued? That's a terrible investment. I'm absolutely not doing that. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a struggle here. I think you kind of always have to be, if you're going to do something like this, you kind of have to be willing to not get paid for it. Not because you should not be paid, but because there's always a risk. It's kind of like if you get the first time, when they bring out a new shoe model or a new watch company comes to market or whatever, if you want to be early on that, you have to be okay with the first one not being good. That's the problem with the first one. The second one, the third one, then you expect it to be better, right? So if you want to be early on anything, you have to be willing for it to suck. That's just the reality of it, because a lot of the time it's intentionally done with a couple of it's not quite ready yet and we'll fix it from there because we'll learn quicker once it's on the market. So that would be my take here, is that unfortunately there's a chance these athletes don't get paid, but again, I hope they do and they really deserve it. But we don't all. It's not always fair life. So fingers crossed for them to get paid. Fingers crossed for MJ that doesn't tarnish his reputation, and we can see more Grand Slam track, because I think it was cool to see. I think they could do more. We talked about doing odd distances rather than the same distances every time. I also think that it'll be interesting for us to watch some of the athletes that race Grand Slam and then look at how they perform at the World Championships, because that's such a long season. We talked a bit about that already previously. So let's have a bit of a look at that and keep an eye on that.
Yeah, let's see how that goes. Things are not looking positive for them as an organization. Let's see if they can rescue the situation. Should we touch a bit on the Tour de France, the men's Tour de France? Because you and I were both there. I think next week we'll come back and we'll have a look at the women's Tour de France, the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, and fun little tidbit. You and I are actually going to go to the last stage today in about 2 hours or so after recording this, because they're not far from here. David very generously is allowing ASO, the Tour de France organizer, to take part on his roads, to race their race on his roads around his chateau here. So we're going to roll down your mountain later and go watch them. But let's review the men's race. So obviously, like you predicted months before, and like everyone really predicted, Tadej Pogacar was untouchable, winning his fourth Tour de France.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways to look at this. I've seen some people say it was very boring as a result of that. I think it's not an unreasonable take, depending on how you want to think about it. I think that watching Visma really working hard to try and break him in different ways was interesting to watch. They did all sorts of stuff tactically that was really good. He obviously lost a lieutenant as well. So I thought it was really interesting. But I mean, he ultimately was untouchable. Like
Visma this year did not have the team. The tactics were correct, but they didn't have a strong enough team to activate those tactics correct, like to get the most out of those tactics.
Yep. And I mean, listen, the last stage was great. We got to watch it in person. That was stunning. And like Wout van Aert rode really well there. So like, it's great. I was interested. I mean, Roglic came in, was like, everyone was thinking he was going to be a leader. He just basically came in, was like, I'm just kind of riding for fun. I don't really care. He wore those socks that everyone lost their mind over. He wore some ankle socks one day and everyone was like, oh, he clearly doesn't care, as those socks make a difference. I'm like, yeah, it was, fascinating, man. I really don't know. But we also saw, as a result of that, Florian Lipovitz come through in his team and a couple of other young riders, Oscar Onley, with also one of the best fan group names ever, the Only fans.
That's so good. I don't know.
Oh,
first time I'm hearing this. Oh,
they had signs everywhere, the Only fans. So we have it on pretty good authority based on rumors that are in social media that he's probably going to change teams next year from Picnic Post-NL to somewhere else. But he may be the sole reason that Picnic Post-NL don't get relegated down to a different thing. So that was interesting, mate. What do you think about the young riders coming through? I thought he was good. Florian Lipovitz was good. Anything else from you in those thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a little sad for Remco Evenepoel. Obviously, didn't have the perfect start to the season. He had that crash in January where it was more serious than we first heard. So he was off the bike, I think, for something like 4 to 6 weeks. He was in hospital. It was a really tough time for him. And I think to go up against the 1%ers, the Pogacars, the Vingegaards, if you don't get there at 100%, it's a really it's an uphill battle. I think Remco also suffers from coming to the sport quite late, like converting from football to cycling. He won his first race ever and the engine was there, but you can certainly see he lacks in technical ability, like on the descents, how he goes downhill. And that just comes with experience and time, whereas the guys he's up against, they were born on a bicycle, so they're further down the road when it comes to technical skills. But yeah, good to see some young riders coming through. I was a little surprised, not really surprised, but the gap between first place and 10th place, like just
Wild.
massive time gaps by the end of the race, which just shows the divide between the top teams and the smaller teams trying to have a seat at the table.
Yeah, I mean, there was a bit of a blow up from some people, including one of the coaches from one of the teams. I won't name him, but Wout van Aert also said this. Like, he was a bit frustrated that the uphill time trial had a cutoff changed and it salvaged probably 8 or 9 riders, which I think, yeah, it's one of those things. Like, you either want them to finish or you don't. I mean, if you have a cutoff time, you should enforce it. You don't change it and those sort of things. And I think you have to. You can't change it even close to the day. It has to be well before the Tour de France because people need to be training for it or not and suffering the consequences of missing that time cutoff because there are other people who spent time to try and make sure they could make it. So I tend to agree with that. There's also some blow up from Cofidis about the feed zone locations. And I think their router, Kevin, what was his name? Coquard?
Brian Coquard.
He ended up breaking a finger from one of the musettes because of the feed zone. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
some of the decisions this year were questionable. I remember the first week when two riders crashed on cobblestones when they were going for the King of the Mountains. Like how you put a sprint on cobbles is just irresponsible. I mean, I could have seen that. Actually, I saw them crashing even before when I saw them approaching cobbles. The line was on the cobbles. I was like, we're going to have a crash here. Zero surprises. Like how you can have that in the biggest race in the sport in 2025 is, some of the decisions are questionable.
Safety stuff's not a strong point for the UCI, despite their efforts. But interestingly, they made some choices this year that effectively ended up with, between that and the way teams raced it, a series of one-day races is what the Tour de France felt like. And I think that was great for viewership. I think, it's hard for me because this is the first Tour de France I've really watched properly. I've kind of half watched a couple, but like this one I watched properly. But it was like, oh, I want to turn on tomorrow because that stage sounds great. I want to turn on tomorrow because that stage great. Or you turn on and you're like, ugh, whatever. And then you're like, oh, wait, they're doing this crazy thing today. So, you wake up one day and all of a sudden Mathieu van der Poel and Ricketts have gone off the front from the start. And everyone's like, are they going to catch him? Are they not going to catch him? So, I think
cool. I think it's a melting pot of different objectives by the team. So a couple of teams will come in wanting to win the race overall. Other teams will come in wanting to be as many breakaways as possible to improve their chances of winning a stage and getting exposures for their sponsors. And then other teams will literally just target a handful of stages. They'll be like stage 9, stage 15, stage 20. Those are the ones we've gone and those are the ones we're going all in on. And that's what creates this every single day. You don't know what's happening. There's excitement, and
I think that's probably a change, and I don't know what changed it. I have a bias as to what changed it, but I won't voice that. But 20 years ago, that probably wasn't the case. It was like, we're a sprint team, we're going to win some sprint stages, and we're a GC team. Now it's like, oh, I want to win some stages, or I want to be in the breakaway. I think the definition of success for teams has changed, some of the teams, and I think that's a good thing for the sport because it creates a wild card, or it creates variability. Whereas otherwise it's Visma versus UAE, and it's a very boring tour because there's other things happening as well. And there are tactical changes that get made as a result of that happening as well. So I think it's kind of cool. The last stage was on Montmartre. We already talked about it. Do you reckon it's going to stay? There's lots of discussion about this. It used to traditionally be like pretty much a procession and then a bit of a sprint in Paris. Given what we saw, what do you reckon, mate? I reckon it's staying because I think it's just so much more exciting. But
I think it will stay. Most of the riders are happy with it. I think you are increasingly fighting for attention, competing against other sports. And I don't know if there's a place for procession in professional sports anymore. I think it's enticing. It's the last day. Everyone's exhausted. And shout out so because of the rainy conditions that neutralized the general classification, shout out to Tadej Pogačar for honoring the yellow jersey and actually racing on the last stage because he didn't have to do that.
Well, I think you wanted the stage win, mate, if I'm honest. But we were in the car with Mathieu van der Poel's dad, and he made a point that I really loved. I mean, I don't get a say in this, but he made the point, like, if the last day is a procession, then stop the race on Saturday.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, fair enough. I tend to agree with that. So,
quick shout out to Ben Healy as well. He was the most animated rider, probably after Tadej Pogačar the entire race. And when he was in yellow and he rocked up in the denim jacket, waistcoat, I was like, this is what sport needs. It's unbelievable.
So also got a great little dasher into that team and him. So, hey, who would you say are the winners of this tour? Not the person who won, but like winners of the tour. If you said there were winners and losers here, not, yeah, I won the GC or I won this jersey, but like overall they would walk away and people go like, oh, they did really well, or they're winners. I mean, Ben Healy comes to mind. Anybody else?
I mean, UAE without question, but put that aside, I would say EF and Ben Healy. They operate on a fraction of the budget that the big teams operate on, and they are so smart. They are so strategic in how they approach races, how they choose their team, and they were thrown a spanner in the works early when Richard Carapaz got sick. And he's their best rider. He's the most expensive rider they've ever had on that team. And he got sick in his native country in South America and couldn't do the race. So they had to pivot a bit. So coming out and getting this amount of exposure, I would have to say it's EF. And then, especially in the early stages, Alpecin to Koenig, with Mathieu van der Poel and Jasper Philipsen before both of them left the race. And then they also showed the depth that they had with Caden Groves winning the stage later on. So
I spoke to them, some of their team and or some of the sort of support staff, and they said the goal was 3 stage wins with 3 different riders. amongst a green
That's
jersey
wild.
goal. So, and they did
That
it.
is
And
wild.
to
Yeah.
me, and I said this to the guy at the time, like that speaks to a program rather than talent. Is if you can win with 3 different people, now you've got a good program. I think so. They also did a bunch of stuff to make the race interesting. Like we talked about that breakaway and stuff. So yeah, I agree with you. Anybody you would say, like my take here is Vizima are the losers. They didn't. I mean, Wout van Aert helped salvage things a little bit at the end, but otherwise, like it's a pretty rough tour for them. Not a lot of stuff was great. I don't think they'd walk away that happy. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the successful team that they've built over the years and what they've achieved, where they walk away with 2 stage wins, they walk away with the podium placing, second place, and that to them is not successful, probably. It is, I think, a little better, as you said, Wout van Aert salvaging the last stage. I literally think they said to Wout for 4 or 5 days, recover in the peloton, ride easy, like don't do any work. And a guy like him at his level, if he's just rolling around in the Gruppetto for 4 or 5 days, that's how he comes into the last stage and drops a fatigued Tadej Pogacar. So that was smart on their part. We were standing right across the finish line when he rolled across the line, and the way him and Richard Pluger, the team CEO, embrace each other, spoke about how much that meant to them. And I think they feel like they've salvaged their race a bit. But overall, I think they wouldn't say it was up to their usual high standards.
Yeah. Anybody else you'd say losers from the tour or be unhappy walking away?
I mean, I don't know. Majority of teams that are like invisible. How many teams are there? 20 teams? Like,
yeah, but so as an example, like I think X would be happy. They were like sort of competitive in some breaks. Like I think they'd be pretty happy.
Absolutely.
I think Tudor's probably happy. Alaphilippe was sort of up there, bits and pieces. I think Coffin is probably unhappy. Broken finger, didn't do much. Like didn't feature much. Although they had the young rider that did really well. He was in the young rider classification. I think he came 6th overall or 5th overall. He was pretty good. So maybe they're happy as well. But I can't think of anybody else, mate. But like, there's a bunch there that wouldn't be too happy. But I think Picnic Post and L are happy. Decathlon are happy. They had some good efforts there. So I think most people are pretty happy.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, we're running out of time. Yeah, I think I can talk about cycling forever, but let's move on. One of the other unhappy people I would say would be Ben O'Connor. He'd be happy that he won the stage, but he lost a tactical error. He lost a top 10. He finished 11th on, was it the penultimate day? Or the third?
He also had a crash when he was looking good. You were like, this guy's in good shape, and he crashed on like day 1 or something. So like, yeah, he'd be unhappy. I mean, they were saying he's pretty happy with the stage, but I think he is, and how he did that was great. But yeah, I think, it's hard. I mean, he's probably not going to be reflecting on it super positively, but.
But anyway, let's move on. I'm tempted to keep talking about cycling. We will touch on cycling in the doctor's office in a little while. But let's talk about what else is in the news. Doping is in the news almost consistently. People are saying, like regularly saying, athletes are avoiding positive tests due to microdosing. I wanted to ask you, is there science behind this? Is there evidence behind this? Is this just people loving speculating?
Probably all of the above, mate. I think it's pretty fair. Like I've kind of landed on a point where you have to be open to anybody being doping, but you have to believe nobody's doping until they're proven that way, because otherwise you just watch everything with such a cynical lens that like you can't enjoy anything. So that's kind of where I've landed on this for the record. But anyway, there is an interesting study from last month, which was called, and there's a link in the show notes, detection of a single microdose of testosterone and recombinant EPO in healthy volunteers. So this is pretty much what you'd be wanting to do if you're an athlete trying to dope. You'd be wanting to use, for the most people, testosterone and EPO would be helpful. Maybe not if you're a pure sprinter, but I have heard that even people like Dwayne Chambers used EPO to help him recover. So perhaps there is something there. But they basically looked to detect recombinant EPO, which is what people would use. It's EPO, which helps create new red blood vessels for people to carry more oxygen, and testosterone, which will help recovery by anabolic signaling. After administration of a single dose of EPO in the ratio of 15 international units per kilogram, and I have researching this didn't make me feel good, trying to find out like what doping levels are and like how much you would take. But anyway, so they used 15 international units per kilogram, and then the transdermal testogel, which was 100 milligrams in healthy males. And there were only 5 of these people, aged 20 to 36, which is pretty representative, I think, of competing athletes, and weighing 70 to 95 kilos. And yeah, again, that's a hard one. But one thing I'd say here is this sort of research is really hard to get ethical clearance for. So I think with the enhanced games, you could certainly gain some insight into the stuff, but there's lots of reasons why they're negative, so we're not going to go into that. But anyway, so recent studies have categorized the dosage of EPO into three main ranges. So low, which is under 6,875 international units per week. Now, again, the dose in this was 15, but that's per kilogram of body weight. So, you'd be in a 70 kilo person, you'd be at probably you'd be looking at 7,000. So it'd be probably a medium dose, which is 6875 to 13,750 international units a week, and high, which is above that. Testosterone doses range from 250 to 3,500 milligrams per week. So anyway, they use urine and what we call dry blood spot samples, which is a way of blood testing. And they basically collected these over a period of time. They got these people to take the dose. They collected some beforehand. They collected samples after for 10, 24, 36, 48, and 72 hours for urine and dry blood spot. So they also looked at baseline 1 hour post and 24 and 48 hours. Basically, they're looking at what's what we would call pharmacokinetic curve here. So what does it do? We go from zero, assuming or low at baseline. It will go up, go to a peak, and then it will come down. And what does that look like? What does the shape of that look like? So that we can understand how frequently we need to test somebody to catch them, basically, right? So how long is it above baseline and what differences are there? So basically, in all of these subjects, at 36 hours, urine and 24 hours, EPO was detected in these people at 36 hours and 24 hours using urine and dry blood spot, respectively, right? So that's actually good because urine has a longer time to detection and it's easier to get and it's less costly, right? And less
really?
Yeah. In EPO, right? In EPO.
Yeah.
And then basically overall, what they're saying here is World Anti-Doping Agency methods employed show good sensitivity towards detection of microdosing of EPO and testosterone. Now, the problem you have is that you have to still test these people, right? So there's certainly ways to dodge tests when you are going to, sort of test positive. So I'm somewhat reassured that microdosing is harder, but I'm not convinced that everybody's clean. We don't know what they're taking. We don't know. And there are ways to avoid testing, certainly. So, that is what it is.
Okay. We haven't touched on the big breaking news from a couple of weeks ago of Ruth Chepngetich testing positive, right? Chepngetich, sorry.
Yes, we have not talked about that. No.
Okay. Yeah, that was big news.
There's not a lot to say. She was taking a diuretic. She got caught taking a diuretic. It's not gonna erase her record because she wasn't testing positive at the time. The point has been made that you wouldn't break a world record and start doping. I think it's a reasonable point, but you also can't remove people's results just because you think they were doping at the time. You have to prove it. Diuretics aren't necessarily performance enhancing. They are generally used as masking agents. So you pee more, so your concentrations go down. She got caught. I don't know what else to say. There's tons of discourse about this. There's been podcasts all about it. Everyone's saying, I told you so. There's not a lot more to say here aside from, and the call here is to have her agent banned. Everyone's saying that's the solution, is to say this agent's had multiple people, high profile, test positive and all that stuff. And I think that's reasonable. It's one reasonable solution is to hold people accountable. But if you think that banning agents is going to solve the problem, it's certainly more than nothing, and it's certainly not a bad strategy, but I'm not convinced that it's going to be the solve that we think it is, because that would assume that the agents are instigating this, and I'm not convinced that they are, because there's always going to be an incentive to dope when it could change your life, regardless of who that's from, whether it's from the manager, from the coach, from the athlete, or from somebody else. So I do agree that we need to hold people accountable who are not necessarily the athlete as well as the athlete, but I'm not convinced that just banning a manager is going to be, I'm not convinced that banning a manager is going to be a thing, because to say he's had multiple positives, it's reasonable. We just don't know that anybody else hasn't at this stage. So, yeah.
Yeah, athletes should never be put in that position, but also most of these athletes are adults, and there seems to be a willingness to participate as well. So you have to try and come at it from all angles, I think, not just one angle. But let's move on. I mentioned earlier we're going to talk about a bunch of cyclists in the doctor's office. But before we do, I think you found an interesting article, right? The title of the article is Epidemiology of Injury and Illness Across All Competitive Cycling Disciplines, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. What did you find interesting about this article?
Yeah, this is again from last month. So like a couple articles hot off the press. Basically, just looked at like what injuries happen, how frequently do they happen, and sort of try to compile a bunch of these studies across different cycling disciplines. Remembering that cycling is road cycling, it's mountain biking, it's bicycle, BMX as well, and it's track cycling as well, and then Olympic cycling or paracycling. So there's a bunch here. There wasn't anything found for BMX, gravel, indoor, etc. Esports cycling. Listen, if you having an injury with esports is going to be a problem. But you're remembering injuries are just anything that causes you to miss time. So that can be tendon problems or illnesses or whatever. But basically, this was looking at this because we see a ton of injuries in cycling and it's trying to understand them and which ones happen more. So overall incidence range between 0.37 and 17 injuries per 1,000 hours of cycling. Now, that's generally what we do is look at exposure time because some will be different durations, right? Like you can't say this many things happen a year if one guy's riding 30 hours a week and one guy's riding 1 hour a week. So you look at per 1,000 hours. The problem with BMX particularly is it's really hard because 1,000 hours is a terrible denominator because the runs in BMX are like seconds or a minute. So you're probably better off looking at runs. And that's what the IOC suggested following this. But over the past 3 Olympic cycles, a proportion of injury prevalence in BMX is among the highest across all Olympic sports, which I found to be interesting. And probably, again, not surprising. There's a lot of jostling for position. There's lots of falls. It's pretty high octane. So It doesn't surprise me here. It's actually really interesting watching BMX athletes train. I've watched a few of them and like they are really explosive people. Cycling seen as an endurance sport. BMX is not an endurance sport. Like it's power endurance. It's wild. So
it's just so cool to watch.
So basically, the most common injuries, probably surprises no one, were upper limb injuries. This is particularly the case in BMX, which was 65% of the injuries were from upper limb. Road cycling was 48%, and then track cycling, which was 44%. So an upper limb injury would be broken wrists, arms, and collarbones, probably. And then skin lacerations as well as part of that, right? So skin injuries in the upper body. So again, probably surprises nobody. Maybe it's a bit low for most people's estimation. So skin lacerations, abrasions, and lesions. So this is cuts, scrapes, grazes, etc., are more common across all disciplines, with bone fractures being the second most common. Again, probably surprises nobody. If you fall off your bike, you get road rash or whatever, and probably break a bone, right? And that's probably upper limb. Within road cycling, bone fractures accounted for 17% of all injuries seen, despite the high incidence of head, neck, and face injuries, which was 14%. We'll talk about head injuries.
Yeah.
And then road cycling had the lowest incidence of concussion at 4.19%. And again, that's probably a velocity thing. If you think about velocities, they are going quickly, but if you think about it compared to mountain bike or you think about it compared to BMX, it's probably not quite as quickly, or at least it's more controlled. And then gastrointestinal illness had the highest prevalence in road cycling compared to others, and it was 17%. So that's, again, gastrointestinal.
Why would that be?
Well, it's higher than other cycling types because it's more of an endurance sport than mountain biking and all those things. So you can get it. So they have more exposure in terms of like they're on a tour. They're doing the Tour de France. So they're getting sick because someone's doing something funny to the food or something. And it probably gets passed within a team as well, right? If a gastrovirus happens, it gets passed within a team, and the teams are bigger and more close in things like road cycling than track cycling. So respiratory illness was most prevalent in the track, which is 31%, and mountain bike, which was 31% as well. Well, they were very similar.
That I'm trying to figure out because track takes place indoors.
I mean, that may be why, is that it's a smaller space. It's easier or there's less dispersion of the air, so they may transfer to each other more frequently, but it's hard to know. I mean, this stuff is probably like, some of this is probably overreading it, but you wouldn't want to go too much into it.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for that. That's very interesting. Before we get out of here, let's take a look at the doctor's office. Mathieu van der Poel, we touched on him earlier. He left the Tour de France with pneumonia before finishing. You mentioned we were in the car with his dad. Someone else was in the car and they asked his dad how he was doing, and his dad said, I saw on TV that he's back on his bike and he's doing better apparently.
Yeah, I just
classic
love that.
Parent.
I love that, because that's exactly what it showed. Is like, doesn't matter who you are, you're probably like as a kid, you're probably not telling your parents all of it. So that was really cool. I'm not sure if this is viral or bacterial pneumonia. You could certainly have both. I'm assuming it was viral. It's very common to have upper respiratory tract infections in endurance athletes, particularly if they're immunosuppressed. And I'll tell you, there's no one who's not immunosuppressed at the Tour de France. Particularly, for me, the thing was like that day where he went so deep to try and, make the breakaway the whole day. Like, it doesn't surprise me. He got sick a little bit after that. And I saw Whoop put up a post about, sort of his data. I mean, I didn't check the data, but, I'm assuming he had a high respiratory rate, a high heart rate for him, which is probably low for the rest of the world, and a low HRV for him, and perhaps had some sleep impairments. And no surprises, he probably had a impaired recovery score or whatever. So, he's back, so he's doing all right. And, again, these guys will bounce back pretty quickly.
I don't want to misquote it here, but I remember the Whoop graphic. I can sort of see it in my head. And whatever the metric is, I don't know what the metric is, but he was on 1% or something.
Yeah, that's his recovery metric, yeah. So again, It's just like out of 100, and, he would have had poor sleep, high respiratory rate, high heart rate, low HRV.
Yeah.
And so he would have, that would have given him a recovery. And then he would have also had like high activity the day prior. So that's kind of the ingredients that go into that metric. And then they weight it different ways, and like his would be bad for him. So, yeah.
We'll have a look at the Tour de France from avec Zwift in more detail next week. But on the opening stage, the not defending champion, she didn't win last year, actually. Demi Vollering, she was second by 4 seconds, I think. Demi Vollering crashed on the opening stage and seemed like she might have been concussed. They'd taken her to hospital.
Yeah, so Benji Nason, I think it was, you sent me a post from him about this, and his take was really good here. So she fell. She was a suspected concussion after the finish, right? So she fell. And so people who don't know, there is a distance from the finish line, which varies, but it's usually 3 to 5 Ks. And within that space, if you fall or if there's a crash and you're in that group, you get given that group's time, right?
Yeah.
When you finish. That's exactly what happened to her. It was within 5 Ks, she fell. She had she had a head knock and a suspected concussion when they finished the race. They didn't really do much of a concussion screen. She got back on the bike and pedaled to the finish. My take here, and I've said this before, like we talked about the concussion rule in cycling before and concussion screening, she should just be screened and she's just not finished, and she should just be given that time. Her soft pedaling 4-point-something kilometers makes no difference to her fatigue levels. Absolutely none. This is an elite athlete. The impairment on recovery that her having to go get scans and stuff did is much more significant than her soft pedaling 4Ks. Who cares? If you're in within that 5K distance, I think you just pulled off. If you've had a head knock, again, these are not things people fake. We can't have something like Bloodgate in rugby where we had a substitute who was given, who had a fake blood pill. Like, you can't fake a crash, or you can, but it's like, it doesn't happen. We can all see the crashes are bad or good or whatever, and no one wants to do that. It's not worth the risk. So I think you just take her off the course and go, listen, let's go assess you properly. You don't have to finish today if you're in that zone. And, I already spoke previously, if she falls at whatever, kilometer 20, and it takes you 10, 15 minutes to assess her, I think you drive her up the road, drop her off in front of the peloton. She gets to jump back in the group she was in, and she goes from there. Again, yes, it's not a perfect situation, but we've got to prioritize health over the sort of the race in these regards. And again, no one's going to be able, and no one is faking falls, and they're not a performance enhancer. There are varying levels of, there's various levels or varying levels of severity, but they're never good.
Shout out to Benji. That was a really, really good take. And then the last one is Julien Alaphilippe, who has pulled out of races subsequently after the Tour de France with a upper respiratory infection, I think he had. And you sort of called it. You don't remember, but we were in Paris and we were talking to one of the team sponsors, and you were saying, "Oh, no, a number of riders will get sick after this, guaranteed."
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things to it. I mean, it was a particularly miserable day, and I'm not one of those people who believes that, like, oh, you've been cold and wet, therefore you're going to get sick. But certainly they were all immunocompromised at the end of the race. Like, that's just what happens, and they're just going to get sick. Like, that's just what's going to happen anyway to a number of them. It's not a particularly difficult call to make. It happens every year. It's common. So, it didn't surprise me that this happened. You feel sorry for them, but also, like, they'll recover. They'll be okay, right? And I mean, listen, there's things they could do. There's hand hygiene and mask wearing and that sort of stuff to prevent exposure. And then there's, of course, we talked about probiotics previously, and I'm sure they're doing all those things. But ultimately, they're effectively calorically deficient and amongst a number of other things. So, that's what's going to happen, unfortunately.
Right, let's get out of here. I want to ask you what you'll be watching this weekend, but I don't have an answer for that. I've spent the last 3 weeks on the road. I'm looking forward to going home. I have zero idea what is happening in the sporting schedule. We're very closer to the Premier League coming back. Manchester United going to win the Premier League this season. You heard it here first. Um, you can tell I'm tired. I'm losing my mind a little
It's a bold call.
Do you have any idea what you're watching?
No, I to be honest, no real plans. So I think that's a good thing. I'll watch bits and pieces of stuff that is on maybe, but like in the mountains, it's much less TV or much less content watching, which I think is a good thing for me.
Okay, cool. Let's get out of here then. A big thank you again to Precision Fuel and Hydration and to Stride for supporting us on this podcast. And if you are still listening at this point of the pod and you have not subscribed yet, you're a terrible human being. You should subscribe right now. Thank you. We appreciate you. Appreciate you listening, downloading, and streaming. And if you found this valuable, please share it with a friend. David, thanks so much for putting this together. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks, mate. See you later.
Ciao.